All right, good evening, Facebook and YouTube followers. I'm Chris from Roasters Marketplace and the Common Grounds podcast. Tonight we will be interviewing another Chris. This Chris is from Rivet American Coffee Roasters, located in Carmel. Is it Carmel or Carmel? How do y'all pronounce it?
Here we call it Carmel.
Carmel. Okay, so Carmel.
Carmel is out in California.
Okay, Carmel, Indiana, which is just north of Indianapolis, I believe. Last time I looked on the map, right?
Yep. Just we're right north of the city.
Awesome. So tonight we're sponsored as normal by Roasters Marketplace. We offer over 115 specialty coffee roasts on our website from 15 different roasters, and Chris and Rivet Coffee is one of those roasters, and he's also our this month's Roasters Choice Programs coffee roaster, and he'll be supplying our subscribers to that program with a bag of Caravel. Did I say it right?
You did.
All right, Caravel coffee. It is one of my favorite roasts that he produces. It's a really good classic type. If I was going to describe it, it's really chocolatey, and it's got some really nice, deep, earthy notes to it. But enough about that really good coffee, because now I'm wanting a cup and I don't have any. I won't have any until my subscription gets here. But Chris, give us a little bit about your background, where you're from, what you did prior to coffee roasting, and how you got introduced into specialty coffee.
Okay, sure. So I have an IT background. Went to school for electrical engineering. Went right into IT like everybody else did in the 1990s, because that was the boom time. And had lots of IT jobs. I've done just about everything there is in IT. When I finished my last gig, which was October of 2019, I was this chief technology officer for a multi-billion-dollar company. That gig, I knew it was going to end. I could kind of see where it was going. I could tell that they really didn't need me anymore. I'd been there at that company for 20 years. Implemented a lot of various systems they used there, but just kind of ran out of things to do. So it really was just time for me to go. So I could tell that gig was going to wrap up at some point in 2019. And I just didn't feel like I was really providing any value. So been interested in coffee for a long time. And after 30 years of IT, I was just ready to do something different. Anybody who's been in IT for a while knows what it's like. It can be very bureaucratic. It's not a very artistic endeavor, whereas I always have had a little bit of an artistic bone in my body as far as that goes. I have lots of other hobbies. I like to woodwork. Would love to make a living at that, but it's hard to compete with factories in China for furniture. So not really something you could really make a lot of money at, especially comparing it to IT. I like photography. So just have lots of hobbies. And up till October of 2019, coffee was another hobby. I've been roasting coffee for about a decade. Probably started in 2010 or 2011. The way I got introduced to specialty coffee was I had a friend, actually a guy I hired that worked for me for a long time. He also is in IT. He started roasting his own coffee. And up to that point, like most people, I'd go to the store and buy my coffee, maybe go to Starbucks and buy a bag of coffee, maybe the occasional coffee store and buy a bag of coffee. But I didn't realize what coffee could be like if it were fresh. To me, the freshness is the biggest thing that you're missing when you're buying some coffee, say at the grocery store or somewhere like that. So I was one of those people that liked to drink my coffee, but I would put all kinds of stuff in it in order to be able to drink it, because it was bitter and just stale and not very good. So after getting some coffee from him and starting to buy coffee from him because it was so good, having been roasted a day or two or three ago, I got interested in it. So when he decided to upgrade his machine, I bought his old machine from him, started roasting my own. So I just did that. From then on, for a decade, I've probably never bought a bag of coffee. I just would buy greens. There's clubs that you can buy greens in when you're not roasting a lot, or you can get divided up bags, and just learn the process from there. And last year, kind of early last year, about this time, about in March, I actually went and took some classes from Mill City. Bought 2 Mill City machines. I've got a 3 kilogram, which is right there. And then I have a 500 gram over there in the corner. So obviously I do most of the production roasting on the 3 kilogram, and the 500 gram is for sample roasting. So get samples from your importers and roast them up, see if it's something that you'd be interested in carrying or not before you go and buy a 60 kilo bag, and go from there.
It's pretty cool. So I've got a question that came up that popped into my mind there on that one. When you do get a sample in, how do you go about roasting it for the first time? You're like, okay, do you roast everyone to a certain profile every time to see what you get, or?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to handle it really is to have a sample profile. At least I think, where you roast it more or less to the same point, no matter what it is. Now, obviously, some naturals or decaf or whatever, it might roast quicker, so you have to keep an eye on it. But you're not going to hit the ideal target profile on that bean the first time you roast it. The idea is that you want to compare it against other sample roasts that you've had, and just make sure that it's a bean that has characteristics in it, even though those characteristics might not be emphasized yet. You can still, if you cup it, you can still kind of detect them being there and know if that's something that you could work with to develop the profile that you want.
And when you're doing that, so we can make this a little bit of education for people who are new to specialty coffee, or who are wondering about it. When you say cupping, can you explain a little bit of that process to me?
Yep, sure. So cupping is a standardized process by which you taste coffee and evaluate its characteristics. And there are guidelines around cupping. There's rules around it, and you can follow all those rules to the letter or not, but the key is for cupping to be super consistent. So every time you cup coffee and you're cupping 2 or 3 different coffees at once, usually you want to follow the same process that you did last time, so that you have a reference or comparison from one coffee to the other. Cupping is usually done in these small cups. You will measure out a certain amount of beans. You will grind it a standard way to a certain grind level. I use about 10 grams, and then I fill up my cup. I got a cup. These are what I use today. It's just a little ramekin, cheap little ramekin. Doesn't matter as long as they're all the same and it's all consistent. But I put 10 grams of water in here, or I'm sorry, I put 10 grams of coffee in here. I heat my water at 200 degrees. I pour the water on top of the coffee grinds. You let that sit for exactly 4 minutes, and then you break the crust, And so what happens is all the coffee kind of floats up to the top. When you break the crust, you actually are pushing the coffee in, and it all falls down into the bottom of the cup. But then, if you ever see anybody do the process, this takes a little finesse, but you take 2 spoons and you can scrape off. Basically, you're going to have a little bit of foam on top, and the foam is bitter, and it's actually not something you really want to drink or evaluate. That foam is usually left in your filter if you're doing a pour over or whatever. So you literally scrape that foam off, and then you have a spoon, and you dip and then you wait another 4 minutes for it to cool. And then you take your spoon and you put a little bit of coffee in it. And then if you're a coffee nerd or a coffee expert, you slurp that in the most obnoxious, loud way possible.
Yes.
And people make it a point of pride to be as loud or louder than the next guy. But what you're doing when you're slurping it is you're atomizing the coffee, and it's hitting the back of your throat and your tongue, and it's allowing you to really detect all the different nuances that might be in that cup, much more so than just taking a big swig of it. So you're atomizing it into the back of your mouth. You get more aroma that way, and you just get a better feel for how that coffee is going to present itself when it's brewed. So I cup pretty much everything. If like the Caravel blend, I've roasted hundreds of pounds of that so far. I have a profile that I've really dialed in for that. And as long as I hit that profile, probably not necessary to cup that, but I still do occasionally come back and cup it just to make sure nothing's changing, because there's lots of factors other than your machine, other than hitting your profile points and when you want to get to yellow and when you want to get to first crack and when you drop and all that stuff. There's other variables as well. Your greens, your greens dry out over time. It's a seed, it's alive, and the older it gets, the less alive it is, and the less lively that coffee is going to be when you roast it. Flat coffee is often because the beans are getting old when they're green, and the seed is no longer necessarily really living and vigorous, so it just doesn't equate to that good a cup of coffee. So even though the profile is dialed in pretty well, I still cup it occasionally just to make sure from a quality perspective everything is there.
And that Caravel, since we're on that subject, how many different beans go into that one?
Good question. Blends are an interesting subject, I think, especially for specialty coffee people, because when I first started out thinking I was going to be in specialty coffee, and I went, to coffee shops, and I went into SCA classes. I've taken the roasting guild classes from SCA. You hear a lot about single origins, and you would think that specialty coffee is nothing but single origins, especially if you're somebody from the outside looking in. And if you do anything like a blend, then you're just not very third wave. But obvious, I don't know. And honestly, when I was first looking at what I was going to carry, I was just looking at single origins, and I got some good advice from some really, really talented coffee people on the roaster side at Mill City, and then some guys that are helping me with marketing and stuff like that. That you should really consider having some blends. So there are 2 real big reasons why you might do a blend. The first one is, let's say you want to make a more reasonably priced coffee, and Kona is $20 a pound or something, green. Then you could mix that with some Brazilian or whatever, and you could make a Kona blend. And, I don't think it tastes anything like Kona, but you can sell it as a Kona blend. Now that's probably the second wave version or reason for making a blend, which maybe gives blends a bad name. Another reason for doing a blend is having a consistent taste profile that endures over time, or at least over the year. Back to coffee greens being fresh, I only buy current crop coffee. That's stuff that was just picked. I'm not going to buy crops from right now. I wouldn't buy a crop that was picked more than 3 months ago or something like that. Or imported it was probably picked before that, but imported 3 months ago. So let's say that I had this single origin coffee that somebody had went to all this trouble in their cafe to set up on espresso. Well, 6 months from now, I won't be able to get that because it will go out of season. That particular single origin will no longer be available. You could try to replace it with some other single origin that maybe tasted similar, but it wouldn't be the same coffee. What blends can do for you is they can give you a consistent taste profile over time. And I'm sorry, 20 minutes ago, you asked how many beans were in that blend. But this is kind of lead up to why.
No, dude, you're good. You're good. This is awesome stuff for people. This is questions I get when offline, man. I mean, this is what people are asking me in different forums and on this, talking to my friends. They're like, this is the information they want. This is great info, dude.
So blends, really, I think it's pretty important to have maybe at least 4, which is what I have in the Caravel blend, 4 different coffees in there. And the reason is when a particular bean goes out of season, I can't get it anymore until next season, until next crop. Chances are I can find something to replace that 25% of the total blend with something close enough to where nobody would be able to tell that the flavor profile has changed. So I'm only having to change maybe 25% of the ingredients for the blend at any one time. So obviously if you only had 3 beans in a blend, then you'd have to change 33% and so on, 50% for 2. So 4 is maybe a little overkill in terms of flavor profile, but it really allows me to keep it consistent. And that particular blend has the reason for it. So I don't really want to roast anything dark. Maybe one day I'll decide I do, but right now, I think personally, this is a third wave thing probably, but if I buy really high-end beans, I don't want to replace the characteristics that came from that origin, all the natural nuances that are in that bean with char and with caramelization. Some of that is good. Some of that balances out some of the, grassy tones that you might get from coffee if you don't roast it enough. But I think if you overdo it, then you could take any cheap bean and just roast that really dark if you wanted to. But so Caravel is not actually a very darkly roasted coffee. It's more or less a medium. When you look at it, it's pretty light in color, but it does have that rich, earthy taste to it because it's got a quarter Sumatran in there. And it's got some natural coffees in there too. So that's another interesting aspect of that particular blend is, and this is kind of tricky from a roasting perspective, is it's got washed coffees in there and it's got natural coffees in there. So getting that all up to temperature and getting it all to kind of cook or roast at a somewhat similar pace without burning the natural before the washed is finished, it can be a little tricky. It took me quite a few roasts to figure that one out.
Do you ever roast them separate and then combine them?
Well, that's another subject in like I'm finding out, like in IT, there was all kinds of things that you could consider almost like a religious subject where people have strong opinions on stuff. And obviously coffee's like that too, or anything you really care about, there'll be things like that. But so in the coffee world, there's actually like two opposing views on that subject. There is what you call a pre-roast blend, and there's post-roast blend. And I would say the standard method, and the method that probably gets used a lot still in high production environments, is a post-roast blend. And that is where each coffee is roasted individually and then combined together in a blend as it goes into its blended bag or whatever. Whereas a pre-roast blend, you blend your beans, your greens together, and you roast them all together. There are advantages and disadvantages to both. The big disadvantage to a post-roast blend is, yes, you could possibly roast each coffee to its ideal roast level, but what's going to happen then is, especially if it's for espresso, it's going to be really inconsistent. Coffees that are roasted to different points grind differently. They take water differently. They extract differently. So it's really difficult for a barista to take it's more difficult for a barista to take a post-roast blend and get a consistent pull from that and a consistent grind than it is if you roast it all together and it's all roasted to the same level. And a pre-roast. So that's like a religious battle that you'll hear occasionally, especially roasters are like, well, I only post roast because I can roast each bean to its fullest potential. And then other people like me say, well, I think it extracts more evenly and it's easier for the people preparing the coffee to deal with it if it's pre-blended. Also, from my perspective, I'm kind of small right now, so I want to keep, and back to the freshness, I want to keep things, I don't want things sitting around on the shelf. I don't want things to get stale, and I want to ship them out, as close to the date that I roasted it as possible. So consider I have a 3 kilogram roaster. If I post blended, I would have to roast 9 kilograms of coffee, and then so I'd have 9 kilograms sitting around, and I don't know how quickly I may go through it quick, I might not. Whereas if I pre-blend, I can pre-blend 3 kilograms and just roast that and just have that on hand. So that's probably a long-winded answer to your question, but
no, you're fine. And I do have one question that's kind of off the wall. Can you hear a vacuum? Can you hear my wife?
No.
Okay, just making sure. I was sitting here. I was like, not a good time to be doing that. But I'm not really going to go stop her if she's vacuuming at 7:30 on a Sunday night. It's probably because we need it and not because she wants to do it. So
there might be some Cheerios in the carpet.
Dude, yeah, there might be something. But that's really interesting. That's one thing. I talked to a couple roasters about it, and it was all they're all along the same lines. It's one guy I was talking to, but he was roasting for a big order, or he was roasting for a restaurant. Like he had to get that blend roasted and packaged and out that day, and so he was roasting. I'm roasting 20 pounds of this, and then I'll do 20 pounds of this, and then I'll do 20 pounds of this, and then we're going to mix it all together, and then that's their blend,
Mm-hmm.
And that was but that's different. That's 60 pounds of coffee going out the door rather than,
it's a post-roast blend.
Yeah. It's really interesting on the specialty coffees, the different things. Before I got into this, I had no clue on any of it. That the work that goes into specialty coffee and the attention to detail and all of this stuff, and then you You get the people, well, I don't want to pay $16 a bag for this coffee. Well, there's a lot of work that's went into it that to get that really, really good profile out of it. How many cups of coffee can you get out of a 12-ounce bag if you're just regular drip coffee maker? What do you think?
24-ish, somewhere in there. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Let me throw it.
I've been asked that before, and I probably knew the answer, but it's in the 20 realm. Depends. Are you talking about 25 grams or so of coffee per cup?
Yeah. So you're looking at, so if you were paying $3 a cup like you would at most major coffee outlets for a brand, a cup of specialty coffee, that's $72.
Yeah. They have the labor component, and it's funny, coffee shops, people complain about how much coffee costs there, but there's a really good YouTube video. I can point you to it at some point, that this guy kind of breaks down the costs, and it kind of made me not want to have a coffee shop, because you just don't realize how much overhead is involved. The rent, all the things you got to have to run a business like that, the people you got to pay, the machinery, all that stuff. Yeah, it seems like a lot of money to pay $3 or $4 for a cup of coffee, but there's actually a lot. Now, Starbucks, I don't know. They have such. What am I looking for? Economy of scale. They just got to be making a whole lot more money than other people. But your little average coffee shop that's buying their roasted coffee from me at retail, at wholesale, which is about, usually 40% off of retail, they're having to buy the coffee, and then they have to pay somebody to make it, and they have all this rent and overhead, and they have to supply you a cup and all this stuff. So it was interesting. It had like a little pie chart, and it showed the profit margin, and it was like really small.
Yeah.
So these coffee shops in particular, just like the roasters, aren't necessarily rolling in the dough. We all do this because we like it, and we love coffee and, the experience of it. Certainly I could have just went and got another IT job. It would be a whole lot less hours, be, easier job, definitely more reliable in terms of getting paid, and it'd be a whole lot more money. But I just wanted to do something I really liked, and that I was passionate about. I was just not passionate about the IT at that point. So, I don't think you can do a good job at something that you don't really truly care about.
I'm right there with you. For sure. Let's see. I'm looking at my list here. What's your favorite part about roasting coffee? What's your favorite part about being a coffee roaster?
I don't know. It's like the smell, I guess. And your other coffee roasters have said this too, and it is true that it's a very highly sensory-driven process. Yeah, I'm a computer guy. I have my computer hooked up to my roaster. I'm logging everything you could possibly log. I watch all that stuff to make sure that I'm getting consistent results. But if the computer crashed or just start like it should or whatever, don't need it. You can do all of it just through your senses. And I use those anyway, even if I am following the profile. I'll still pull the dryer out. Have you ever pulled the dryer and smelled it through the different processes, different stages?
I've stood there, but I've never smelled it. I haven't actually.
Oh, okay.
smell it.
Next time you go to any of your roasters, just let them stick your nose. I kind of have a somewhat embarrassing photo on the front of my website where I have my nose stuck in the dryer, but just have them let you sniff and sniff at the different points of the process. When you first drop it in, right before the coffee gets to what you call yellow or dry stage, that's when it turns from green to yellow. It smells like grass when it's green. When it's hot, it smells like grass. And then as it gets a little bit further to yellow, it starts to smell like baking bread. And then as it gets further past yellow, almost up to first crack, I love that smell. It's like candy, just wonderful, aroma. So pulling the dryer out, smelling it, dropping it, and then even after it comes out of the roaster, just letting it sit there for a little while, and it's gassing out all this CO2, and you just smell that aroma. I just love it. I guess that's one thing I like about it the most.
What's your current favorite roast that you have?
I really like the Kenyan. I think that's the first one I sent you. I like it because of it's got and it's not an easy coffee to roast. If you underdo it, if you don't develop it enough, it's kind of sour up front when you first try it. But if you get it just right, it's pretty smooth up front, but it's got nice complexity to it. And then on the rear, it's got this nice fruity note to it. So it's really my favorite right now. But the Caravelle blend is actually sold the best. And, like I said, unless I'd gotten some good advice from people, I probably wouldn't even have had a blend.
Yeah. It's really good. That's a really good. And I don't think you've sent me the Kenyan yet.
Oh, I haven't?
I don't
Did I
think
send
so.
you the Caravelle?
You sent me the Caravelle. Yeah.
Okay.
I was really, really. You said you asked me one day. You're like, "Hey, what's your address?" And then 2 days later, I had some coffee in the mailbox, which is if somebody asked me what my favorite part so far of my job is definitely the coffee. It's been such an awesome journey of tasting the coffee that I've been getting from all these different roasters all around the country, and knowing that some of the coffee is coming from really the same farms. There can't be that many sources for Tanzania and Peaberry out there.
Yeah, I have some Tanzania and Peaberry sitting around here right now.
And I've had I've had 2 or 3 different roasts of it from two or three different roasters, and it all has the same notes to some extent, but not one coffee's the same. And or getting something. I got Trail Creek is a coffee roaster that should be up on my website this week. It was a Peruvian coffee, and I looked at it and the label said medium, and I looked at it and I was like, wow, that's a really light medium roast. And so I brewed it up, and I brewed it way too strong for what it was. And it had so many dark notes that if I would have not seen it before I would have ground it up or brewed it, I would have thought it was a really, really dark Sumatran or something like that, because it was really way stronger, way more bold than I would have thought that coffee would have been. And just learning the different regions and how I like it. My wife it does not like anything fruity, or if I brew a cup of Ethiopian, it better be for me. It better not be for her. She really likes.
I'm interested to see if she likes the Kenyan. I'll send you a bag of that.
Awesome.
Because it's not like Ethiopian where it just slaps you upside the head with juicy fruit. It's a lot smoother than that, I think. but it does have some nice complexity and tones after that.
It's just
Yeah.
it's just so amazing to go from not, I used to get Ethiopian every once in a while from, I'd see somebody comment on Ethiopian coffees on Facebook or something. I'd be like, okay, let me try this. And I was like, oh, this coffee's horrible. What, I didn't realize it was supposed to taste like that. Or I wasn't brewing it. I wasn't brewing it to begin with correctly. I was just grinding up what I thought would fill up my basket and running it through the drip, and it just murdering some coffee.
Well, that's an interesting aspect of specialty coffee that I think keeps it from catching on as well as it could. Is there's a reason why most people drink dark roast coffee. There's a couple of reasons, but one of the big reasons is it's just easier to get at least consistent extraction from something that was roasted darker. It's harder to mess up. Your ratios of water to grinds isn't that important. Your grind level is less important. Your quality of your water, your temperature, all that stuff matters a lot less when the coffee is really pretty well done versus that light Ethiopian. If you don't, like you're saying, if you don't get everything done just right, then it could get really weird on you and just not be very pleasant. If you get it all right, it's very I like it, when you get that right. But it is a much more advanced task to get a light roast coffee to taste good, especially if you're using a drip machine or something like that. It's almost, I just haven't had light roast coffee in a drip machine that was all that good.
No.
You have to use a pour over or some other method.
Yeah. We don't even use our drip coffee maker anymore. I think my wife made some coffee maybe Friday morning, Saturday morning in the drip, and that hadn't been used in a week or 2 weeks. I get up in the morning, I do a pour over for myself and make a French roast, or not French roast, but a French press for the wife. And that's our start of the day. And then I might have a V60 later on in the morning or in the afternoon. I'll do an iced coffee or something.
Yeah.
But I think my children are fixing to break in. I hear the door rattling. So if I have to drop my feed real quick, it's you've got the show.
You need a outbuilding like I have where I can lock myself in here.
I wish I go lock myself in the garage, but I'm good. They can't.
Yeah. So brewing is half the equation to having a good cup of coffee. Having a nicely roasted coffee is one thing. Has to be extracted properly, and it's just easier to do that with a dark roast coffee with a lot less knowledge and a lot less consideration to what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's been popular for so long, and light roast coffee's not, unless you're into specialty.
So tell us a little bit about your name, where you came up with the name Rivet Coffee, and tell us a little bit about your buddy that's out there in the outbuilding with you.
Yep, my buddy right over here.
Look at that.
It's a 1964 Airstream. So I spent 2 years restoring that trailer. When we first got it, we used it, but there were holes in the floor and all kinds of things. And we like to take it around the country, and didn't really feel safe doing that until I took it completely apart. So I took the frame off the shell, or the shell off the frame, and completely redid everything inside and made new cabinets for it, and just spent 2 years working on that thing. And at the same time, thinking about doing the coffee thing and looking online and basically being very disheartened because every name I could possibly think of, and I had a whole long list of them, had been used by somebody at some point. Even Rivet Coffee had been used, but it looks like the people had used it were no longer using it because the domain was for sale. So, getting a domain that matches your company name is always a good thing to finalize. Well, I'm going to use that because I've got that domain. So I'm surprised the one you have was available.
That was the whole conversation with the Roasters Marketplace. We were
Yeah.
literally at Tommy Bahama's at dinner, and my wife suggested, she's like, well, what about Roasters Marketplace? It's like, oh, somebody's got that already. There's no way. So 11 o'clock when we came home from eating dinner and having a few drinks, and I got home and it was available, I bought it right then. It's like, what? Okay, yeah. I'll take it.
Yeah, that was pretty lucky. So, you know, it's not really strongly like Airstream blend or branded or anything. It just kind of takes hints from it. Like the names, Caravel is a name. Caravel used to be a ship a long time ago, HMS Caravel or something like that. But it's also the name of one of the older Airstream trailers they used to make in the 60s. Globetrotter, same thing. That's another blend I have. That's a lighter blend with an Ethiopian in it. So it's a more lively blend than Caravel. And that's what my trailer is. It's a Globetrotter. So I just kind of use names from Airstreams to name those blends. And the logo and everything kind of has a little bit of a an aerospace flight kind of theme to it. You know, rivets are also used in aircraft. So
no, I like it. It's good. It's good branding. You've got a good theme. You've got to have that. You've got to you got to have that with a brand. So that way you can get the brand affiliation and the brand just to. It's a good way to do it. It's a good way to market it. So
well, you know, it would be nice just to have great coffee and for people to buy it for that reason. But yeah, the branding has been much more important, and I get a lot of comments, a lot of positive feedback on it. So it really has been worth spending the time doing it, and in some cases spending the money getting people to help me with it. I can use Illustrator and I can draw stuff, but I'm one of those people where if you sat me down and said, draw me a logo, I'll draw 100 of them and I'll never be satisfied with any of them. So, you know, I had actually had guys help me that would say, oh no, that's good enough. Okay, you don't need to keep messing with it. Leave it alone.
Yep.
So
it's definitely hard. And then you've got to do the cost benefit analysis. If I sit down and it takes me 2 days to come up with something, then, or if I could have paid somebody money to do it, what is it? You know, what's my time worth and what's it worth getting that job done? So it looks really good. I like it. And then we're talking about hashtags a little bit and how we were using the Airstream hashtag. Next time I get some Caravel, I'm going to throw the Airstream hashtag on there and see if your friend will show up on my on my feed. I couldn't. You want to talk about that or?
Nah, well, you know, and that's the first time I've ever had anybody kind of give me any crap on Instagram. But yeah, I was using a few hashtags like Airstream restorations, just because I have done Airstream restorations and I have posted things there, but I just happen to still have that tag in posting stuff about coffee. And he's like, please don't post here because that doesn't have anything to do with Airstream restorations. And I'm like, okay, whatever. You must be the hashtag police.
Yep. The hashtag police. But the way I see it as somebody with a little bit of a marketing background, you never know when that hashtag, somebody who follows that hashtag is going to see your coffee.
Yeah.
And then go look at your website and then be like, you know what? I'm hardcore Airstream fan or Airstreamer. I don't know if y'all got a Airstreamer. I'm a hardcore Airstreamer. So I'm going to support this other guy who and his endeavor for coffee. You know, that's how it works. And so
Well, Airstreams are also heavily branded, and it's a lifestyle and it's a brand choice that you make. You know, they're the most expensive travel trailer you could possibly buy, short of the big fancy motorhomes. They're super pricey, and the people that buy them are subscribing to this certain kind of lifestyle. And you know, I'm a member of the Airstream Club here in Indianapolis, and we all go off and go camping in our Airstream Club, our Airstream trailers together, and you know, it's a pretty strong brand identity. So without stepping on Airstream's toes and without trying to infringe anything, I definitely want, and I haven't really taken much advantage of this yet, but I really want to market towards them a bit. You know, we have these big national rallies where you'll have 600, 800 Airstreams show up, and you'll have vendors there. So hopefully at some point I'll be a vendor at some of those events, you know,
Definitely
selling Airstream themed coffee. So,
well, I mean, you look at some of the bigger players out there in in the coffee industry, and I mean, you look at Black Rifle Coffee Company; they've got 1 million fans on Facebook. You know,
oh yeah,
they
yeah.
sell a lot of coffee and they sell a lot of T-shirts, and I would be willing to bet that most people are not buying that coffee the first time, at least, because they're into specialty coffee. They're buying it because it's branded how it's branded. Those guys did a really good job doing it. They did a really good job. You know,
Yeah,
they're making
too. I forget what it's called. They use Rosie the Riveter as their logo, as their kind of in their logo. I can't remember what it's called now, but it's the same thing. It's kind of military branded. And there's another one too called Blue Scorpion.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen that one?
Yeah, I've seen him floating around a little bit.
Seen they're really big on, they're very active on Instagram.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of ex like veterans and such that do roasting, and they build that into their branding.
Yeah, I definitely use the veteran owned business hashtag when on some stuff, but I didn't want that to be my total brand identity as I was rolling out for sure. When you're talking about getting into fresh roasted coffee, when you're talking about specialty coffee specifically, what do you think like the minimal equipment I would need as somebody getting into brewing coffee at home? What would you recommend that I start off with?
Yeah, and that's the other thing that I really want to do, and I know that you want to do too, is do as much education as possible, because you would think, you know, there's a million YouTube videos out there you could watch on all this stuff and figure it out. But I had a question today from a customer who's bought from me 3 times. The first 2 times she asked for it to be ground, and I'll do it. I've got a big industrial grinder for that purpose because I figured I'd have to. But you know, I sent her a nicely worded email saying, "Hey, you know, you might want to consider buying a grinder because you're buying this fresh roasted coffee, and when I grind it, it's going to go stale like almost immediately because of oxygen getting to the coffee." So, and that's why, you know, there's a blog on my website that I know you linked to about buying grinders. So she went and checked out that blog and she bought one of the grinders I suggested. So she's getting ready to order again, and she's going to be ordering whole bean this time, which is a small victory, I think. But in terms of minimal equipment, and I'm going to do another blog because I got another question today from a customer asking, you know, so I'm using a Keurig today with one of the little filter baskets, you know, to brew the coffee. And I just would like to do a better job brewing your better coffee. And it's like, well, great. So that's another blog I'm going to do here pretty soon. And as you know, there's not necessarily one magical way of doing it. but I could definitely can tell a difference between a drip machine, and I guess you could consider a Keurig with a little basket, a drip machine, and a pour over. So my minimal equipment, I would say, for doing coffee, well, it depends. If there's a travel kit and there's a home kit. We want to do the home kit
Sure.
first.
Home kit. Tell me what I need to get to make good coffee at home.
At a minimum, I would start off with a Chemex. That's just kind of the old school. That thing's been around forever. If you actually go and look it up, you can find a Chemex in movies like from the 50s. I think it was invented in the 30s or 40s. It's been around forever. But it's a super simple, a little hourglass design. Do you have a Chemex, Chris?
Yep. Oh yeah. That was my first specialty coffee tool that I bought was a Chemex.
So would you agree? I mean, if that's the first thing you were going to get,
I think I would have, if knowing what I know now, it would probably be a V60.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean it's a very similar process. You just are able to use whatever filter you want, whereas you kind of have to use the Chemex filter for the Chemexes. But I think you need a pour over, whether if it be a V60 or a Chemex. You need a scale. You really can't get repeatable results unless you're weighing stuff. People that take scoops of whatever, especially when you're talking about whole beans, scoops don't do it. And then you really can't measure your water properly. And just having a scale and being able to work out the ratio, like, I usually start off at a 1:16 ratio. So if I want 1 cup of coffee, I would put 25 grams of beans in my grinder, grind that up, and then put that in the V60 or whatever after it's been pre-wetted, preheated, and then pour 400 grams of water over the top of that. So if you have a scale, that's all real easy to figure out and real repeatable.
Oh yeah, real repeatable. And I've seen the comments, in the different Facebook groups and stuff before. They're like, "Oh, I don't have time to weigh it. It takes, if I'm doing 6 scoops of something to make a big pot of coffee, it's quicker for me to dump it into a little cup on a scale and say, 40 grams. Here we go. 40 grams every time."
Not having time is not a good excuse, because I think it's just as fast. In my blog that I wrote on grinders, I mean, you can, if you want to pay $800 or $900 for it, you can buy a grinder that actually has a scale built into it.
I'd like rather have $800 worth of coffee and $100 grinder, I think.
Yeah. Sometimes some people have made more money than have sense, and I might be one of those, because I didn't even realize it when I went to look that price of that thing up, that I own that grinder that has a scale built into it. When I went and looked it up, I was like, holy crap, I paid that much for this thing? It's a great grinder. It's a flat burr grinder, and it grinds like really fast, and it's super quiet, and it could be at home in a coffee shop and it would last forever. But yeah, it's way overpriced. And honestly, you're better off not leaving your beans in the hopper. You're better off leaving them in the bag and pouring out 25 grams if you're making 1 cup, 50 grams if you're making 2, into, like you said, a little cup or something on your scale, and pouring it in the grinder and grinding through all of that and not letting it sit in the grinder. But at a minimum, I think you need a scale, you need a water kettle. Like you were talking with one of the other roasters, you can get pretty cheap ones off of Amazon that go on the stove, but the electric ones that sit on their own little base and that you have a programmable timer or programmable display where you can set 200 degrees and it brings it right up to that and it keeps it there. Those are super convenient.
Yeah.
There's even ones on the market that have timers on them. So when you get up in the morning, your water's already heated up. So it's one last thing that you have to sit there and wait on.
I might have to invest in one of those. I'm actually building I've got to move a TV and stuff here in the office, but I'm redoing a wall here to do my YouTube studio here in my office, because I try to shoot a video in my kitchen. The acoustics are off, and I'd have to be mic'd up to get it to sound right. And then I shot the whole video, and then I watched the whole video again, and about every 10 to 15 minutes, and that's off. Of course, you can hear my refrigerator kick on in the video. So I was like, okay, well, let's see what I can do. So I'm going to end up getting me one of those programmable water.
Brewista has one that has a timer or a clock on it, so you could set it to automatically come on in the morning. But if you don't need that, then you can get one for as little as I think Breville has one for like $50, 48 bucks, something like that on Amazon.
Yeah. There's some even cheaper ones than that don't necessarily have a pour over spout. So
yeah,
you want that.
You really want the pour over spout, I think. Now that's the other option that's out there. It's not a cheap option, but I just got one recently because I just felt like I needed to be able to brew in all the different methods that people use nowadays. Is the Fellows. Have you seen the Fellows brewers?
Yeah.
So I have the XF, I think they call it, which will make 2+ cups of coffee. And the cool thing about the Fellows is the funnel, or the basket where you put the coffee, is really not very big around, but very tall. So it's more like an immersion process than a pour over process. And you don't, a pour over, you can affect the cost or the taste of the coffee by your pour rate, your pour pattern. You can really affect the flavors that you get out of it by just how you pour that water over the coffee. Whereas the Fellows has some pre-prescribed little holes in the bottom, so it controls the flow, and it's a really tall filter basket that sits on top of this double-walled glass, really nice glass vase, and you really can just kind of pour the water into it and let it do its thing, and it's more like an immersion process. I get better, more fruity notes out of that than I do out of say the Chemex or the V60.
I'll have to check that one out. Definitely have to
They're not cheap. They're like almost $100 for a pour over, but it does have that really nice little craft, and then it has it. And then I think the other reason why it works well is it's very thermally controlled. The little pour over basket that sits on top of the double walled craft is also double walled stainless steel. So when you heat it up, when you preheat it and you wash your filter so that you don't get that paper taste that you would get if you used a dry filter, it heats the inside of that stainless steel and it maintains the temperature better. So you're actually brewing at a better temperature, whereas a V60 or a Chemex, you're brewing at much cooler temperature than you think you are because there's no insulation there.
Yeah.
You know how on the V60 or even the Chemex, after you're done brewing and you go to pull that filter out of the top of the brewer, it's cold already. After just a minute or two or three, it's already cold.
Yeah, it definitely takes a little bit of talent on the pour rate to make sure you're keeping it all at the right temperatures.
Yeah.
Where are you carried there locally in caramel?
Well, so really Indianapolis and as a whole is, we're just kind of a suburb of Indianapolis. I've actually gotten it in quite a few places in the last. I've really only been pushing it since January 1st, or actively promoting it. But I am in a little coffee shop in Carmel called Soho. They're actually selling my bags of coffee there. I'm in a grocery, like a really cool little grocery store downtown called Good Earth, which is like a health food store, and they sell a lot of local roasted coffee there. So I'm in there. I just got my biggest coffee shop order yesterday. So I'm supplying them coffee that they'll be featuring me as a pour over on their bar, and also selling bags for me.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's called Bova Conti Coffee, and it's more downtown Fountain Square area of Indianapolis. And I have an ice cream shop. I was just there just right before this call. We're talking to them, so they'll be brewing my coffee and also selling the bags there. So it's picking up. I've got a couple other places in the work. I've got and I know you guys are big on these too, probably bigger. Well, I'm from Atlanta, so I'm used to this, but one of our few mega churches that we have here, I'll probably be working with them on some coffee orders as well.
That's awesome.
Gave them some samples and they seem to like it a lot. So just got to figure out how much they want to start off with.
It's a good market. There's a couple big, there's a couple roasters around here that do that specifically. We've got to do two things before we get off here tonight. I've got to draw. I was running a promotion this last week, so I'm fixing to give away my first year subscription to the Roasters Choice program. And so I'm fixing to throw up random.org here, and I've got to go ahead and put this number in here, 182, and I'm going to generate the results. Let's see, do a share screen here. All right, so we're fixing generate, hit live on number 61. So I'm going to unshare that because I don't want to show a bunch of people's email addresses here. And then I'm going to go find number 61 on my
customer number 61.
Email address number 61. Okay, I got it. Mr. Wade Robertson has just won a year subscription to my Roasters Choice program. So I'll be emailing him shortly. Hopefully he responds to the email and gets his year's worth of coffee. So that's 12 bags of coffee that he's got just for signing up for our email address. So nice. He'll be getting a coffee subscription every month for the next 12 months. Also, one other thing I got before we get out of here tonight, besides thanks a lot for getting on here tonight with me and visiting, Chris, sure, and sharing your roasting information, your coffee knowledge. I love the fact that we can go and do this and take this video, and I'll chop it up in a bunch of little segments and use it as well, because people's their attention spans cannot be sometimes for an hour and 3 minutes like we're at right now. So they're a lot more likely to watch a 3-minute video on us talking about what coffee method they should try than they are going to watch the whole interview. So that's one of the reasons we're doing this. But excuse me, tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, I'm interviewing Nikki Spears, and she's the co-founder of the Energy Bus for School Leadership Journey, a positive school initiative based on the success principles from John Gordon's best-selling book, The Energy Bus. And so that's going on my small business spotlight tomorrow night with Nikki. I got a call with her in the morning to talk to her a little bit more about this. But it's a really, really neat program that they do with educational schools and stuff all over the country. So we're going to get on and talk about and be able to spread the Roasters Marketplace message to a whole new community, hopefully, as well. So, Chris, I appreciate you getting on tonight and talking to me, buddy. And I'll be in contact with you tomorrow with those subscribers' names and addresses for you to send out this month's edition of the Roasters Choice program.
Sounds good. I appreciate it.
Have a good night. Thanks for watching, everybody.